Hey guys, welcome to the 11th episode of DevOps for Developers. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at setting up Nginx as a reverse proxy for our Unicorn application server. Before we get started, I want to take you guys over to this page, and I would like you guys to vote what video series you guys want to see next, whether it's building a project management application right here, or building a real-time chat application for, like, for example, your mobile. We might do a responsive web, or we might do an iOS application. I haven't decided on that yet, but generally I'd like to focus on the web technology. So it probably will be some sort of responsive application. Or if you guys want to see an iOS application, you can vote for that as well. You can suggest an idea, and then, we'll go from there. Basically, this will give me an idea of what you guys are interested in, so I can cater the content to your interests. And secondly, I would like to thank everybody who subscribed to our YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. It really does help us out. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I love to talk to you guys. So if you have any comments or feedback, or you guys think that we can do a better job somehow, we would love to hear that from you guys. So feel free to drop in your opinion and let us know how we're doing. With that out of the way, let's get started. All right, so I have logged into my server here, and before we get started, let me cd back into the home directory. So before you guys get started, let me clear the screen right here. So we're gonna work in our Nginx file. So we're gonna create a reverse proxy for our Nginx, right? So basically we have to go into cd etc Nginx. In our sites available, right? So cd into sites available. We have come here before, and we have set up some sort of a server configuration here before. We're going to go into the checkin.me. I think that's the one we're using for our test. So I'm just going to do a sudo vi. All right, so we already have actually set up a basic server here that serves static sites based on those folders. But we have a different kind of folder here now. We have a Rails app running over there, and basically need our Nginx to send the request over to our application server. If you guys remember our diagram that we drew, basically the request comes to Nginx, and Nginx basically sends the request off to our application server. So in this case, our application server is Unicorn. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all this stuff. All right, so we start from scratch. So basically, to configure our Nginx as a reverse proxy, we need to set up this thing we call an upstream. So this is based on the upstream module that comes along with Nginx. So here we go, upstream, Unicorn. So you can call this whatever you like. You can call it app, or call it, shopper, or whatever. I'm just gonna call it Unicorn. It might be smart to name this something else other than Unicorn if you have multiple apps running in your server. So yeah, just think about that a little bit. But I think for now, Unicorn is just fine. We're going to do server, Unix, TMP, and unicorn.shopper.sock fail timeout equals 0. Okay, so what is that? What does that line do? So basically, we're saying that, using this upstream module, we're telling Nginx where to send the request. So in this case, Unicorn is started and is running on a Unix socket. So that's why we're passing the request off to a Unix socket, which is where Unicorn is waiting and listening for the request, right? So at this point, Unicorn and Nginx is going to communicate through Unix socket, which means it's very low latency, very low overhead, so it's going to be super fast, right? Which is amazing. There are other ways to communicate. You can put in an HTTP server over here, and obviously that will, it will have more latency, more overhead, and all that kind of stuff. So if your Nginx server is living on the same server as your application server, you can use a Unix socket, and that will help your application, out just a tad. So yeah. That's what that does. So now we need to configure the server block. So here we're going to do server name and checkin.me, and then we're going to do another one called www.checkin.me. Close that off. So basically, you guys know already what the server name does. It basically allows us to configure our domain. We're going to listen on port 80, right? So we're going to listen on port 80, which is the standard HTTP port. Default, deferred. So basically, this is going to make our server, this checkin.me here, the default server, which means later on, we're going to have to remove all the other ones. Basically, what default does is basically if somebody types in an IP address to the server, it will come to this one because there's no other domain defined. This will now basically become the default server. Instead of the one that Nginx set up for us, which we'll go and remove later on. But for now, this should be fine. We're going to set the root path. So basically, the root path is where we set up our server, right? The public folder, you know, in your Rails app, you have a public folder. That's going to be your root path. So we're going to do opt apps. I think we called our sites. And then we called it, oh my God, I can't type. And then we're going to call it checkin.me, I believe, which is the name of our folder. And then public. All right. So try files. So what is this? So try files basically before it sends the request over to Unicorn, it's gonna try these files. So basically, if you have like for example, you know, you want to have a maintenance, you know, page set up where your server is currently under maintenance, you can use this sort of thing to basically, you know, set up your maintenance page or something like that. So let's see how this looks. So URI system / so okay, so the next one we're going to type is URI index.html. So what is URI? So URI is basically a variable. It's basically gonna look in this root folder, right? So basically URI is you know, whatever the domain you typed in. So it's gonna be checkin.me, and then in the public folder, it's gonna look for the system, and it's gonna look for the maintenance file, right? So if the maintenance file does not exist, then it's gonna go to the index.html file, right? And if the index.html does not exist, again, it's going to pass a request over to our Unicorn upstream, right? Okay. So here we're going to start off with our location Unicorn. So basically, the upper one where it says URI Unicorn, now we need to define what the hell Unicorn is, right? So because if these system maintenance HTML does not exist and index.html does not exist, we say that pass it on to the Unicorn. So we have to tell it now what Unicorn is. So location at Unicorn. So basically now it knows what Unicorn means. Unicorn just means this little block over here we're about to type, right? So let's review this a little bit. Try files. First, we're going to try the system.maintenance.html. If that one doesn't exist, we're going to try index.html. And if that doesn't exist, we're going to try the Unicorn block, right? Which is this little block down here we're about to type out. Okay, so here we need to set a few things which are pretty important. So for example, you know, the request header, some header information requests we need to pass into Nginx. Into our Unicorn application, things that will allow us to determine the IP address of the person who's accessing our server. You know, if you need to track IP of the person who's signing in or whatever, you're gonna need this setting here. So proxy set header x hyphen forwarded for proxy add x for forwarded 4. So why do we need this header? We need this header because basically the IP address of the person who's accessing our server is gonna come in to Nginx, right? So once it comes into Nginx, it needs to get passed into our application. Otherwise, our application will not know what the IP address is because it wasn't passed. It was just Nginx got the IP and didn't have the right header, so the IP address didn't get passed. So okay, so let me just correct a few mistakes here. Yeah, so basically that header will just pass the IP address over to our server. All right, so we're gonna type out the next setting, so which is it's gonna be proxy set header x forwarded proto. Okay, so what is this proto? Proto actually stands for protocol. And what it does is basically it's going to pass in whether this is a HTTP or an HTTPS request, right? So this information needs to be passed on to our application server. So yeah, that's why we're setting these headers. All right, let's go to the next one. So this is basically going to pass on the host into our application. So the host is basically going to be the domain name, right? It's going to be the host name of our application. So basically, these three headings and these three settings just basically pass on the information about the request. You know, which domain it's coming from. If you guys have ever seen you know, sites where they allow you to have your own domain and basically that domain then maps to your account in your page. So like for example, about.me or your WordPress app, that domain then maps to your WordPress blog. This is basically how they do it. They pass the host and all the information in, and then based on that, they match it to your account and they load up those data for you. Yeah, just a quick summary of what these things do and what you can potentially do with them. But yeah, that's basically all what you know what the point of passing on these information to your application server is. Okay, so the next one is we're gonna not do any redirect with our Nginx server. So we're just gonna do proxy redirect off, right? That's pretty straightforward. So here's the magic line, right? Proxy pass, right? So this is where the magic happens. HTTP, and then here we type in unicorn. So this is what you type in as the upstream. This is where the name of the upstream means, right? So we call the upstream unicorn. So this is where we are passing the request. So basically what happens is now, once all these, before we actually pass any requests to the application server, we're gonna set all these settings, right? So once we set all these settings to the request header that comes from the browser, then we pass it off to our unicorn application server, right? So basically this block right here is how you configure a reverse proxy. This is what a reverse proxy means. This means you can do all kinds of things through the request before actually passing it on to your application server, right? All right, so this is a bit of a Rails specific things. So with Rails 3 onwards, we have what we call a assets pipeline. So we need to do a few settings for those. So basically, here's how we do it. So location, and then we have this control, and then tilde, well, and then slash assets. So what is this? This is basically saying that any request that comes that has the assets in there, we're going to apply these settings to them, right? And these settings are going to be things like, you know, setting gzip, you know, so gzip static on. Okay, let me correct that. So basically, this is going to turn on gzip for the request, which means we can actually serve the gzip version of the asset. So if you run rake assets precompile, it's going to actually create a zip version of that for you. And with this setting on, it means that the browser can accept the gzip version, and the unzipping will happen in the browser. So less data transferred, quicker results. Yeah, that's basically what that is. Expires max. So basically we just say that it never expires. It just it never expires. Like if there was a cache header set on it, it would keep using the same one, because the Rails assets pipeline, the hash number after the assets change anyway, and based on that we get the new assets. So whatever, until that the Rails assets pipeline does not change the assets, keep using the old one. Add header cache control public. So basically we're saying that our we can actually put this in the public cache. So to when basically what will happen is Nginx will actually make sure that because these files do not need to be like accessed through a username or a password. They can be accessed from the public cache, sorry. So that's basically what we're setting. Add header access control allow. Okay, so what does access control allow origin star mean? It just means that if somebody is trying to access the assets from outside of the domain that we have here, like for example, if someone was being naughty and tried to access our data from Rails through another through another page, we wouldn't allow it. But if it's just the assets, we allow it because it doesn't make a difference anyway. You might want to do this if you want to like host your assets on your server and you basically want those assets to be accessed outside of your of just people coming into the browser, so they can access it from another page, right? These assets. So it's pretty open. The setting here is pretty open. Maximum cache time, allow gzip, and basically we can use public for our cache. It's a public cache, which means that in the intermediate, if you set up another proxy server or something, and you allow these assets to be cached, basically you're just maximizing the performance, right? You're just making it available as much as possible. If you have a CDN or anything like that, you will probably need these headers to be set like this. Otherwise, it probably won't work, right? So yeah, that's that's pretty much the gist of this setting here. It's just basically the set to allow our assets to be accessed, basically, from CDNs or whatever, right? To maximize performance for our application. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set the error pages, right? So error page 500, 502, 503. So if you don't know about HTTP errors, I recommend you read them up. We're just gonna pass it over to 500.html. So every Rails app comes with this 500.html, is that dreaded red text error, sorry something went wrong, that you guys probably see too often now. Basically, we're just saying that if there's any server error, just basically pass it on to that page. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the next thing we need to do is client max body size for G. Okay, so basically client max body size 4G. What that means is just what is the limit of the request? Like if when the client is sending a request, what is the maximum size of the body that can be returned, right? I guess in this case we're setting it to 4G. All right, we're almost there. Let's type out the last line. So keep alive timeout 10. So what is keep alive timeout 10? Well, keep alive timeout 10 is basically when a browser hits the server, how many seconds should we count before we consider, like if there's no response from the server, how many seconds should we count before we mark this request as timed out? You guys have probably seen it. If you hit a server that's very busy, you'll probably see that the browser is just spinning and nothing is happening, and after a while it just times out. Basically, we're setting this to 10 seconds, which I think is more than enough for most cases. But you could increase this. 30 seconds is also a sensible number. You can set this up as high as even 60 or 75. I'm going to keep this as 10. By default, if you don't set this, Nginx sets it to 75 seconds, which is quite long. But yeah, I mean, depending on, what kind of configuration you need, you can always come and change this, right? So basically, let's go through this once more. I want to connect a few more dots over here. So basically, I'm just going to open up the application configuration, the Nginx configuration we had from last time. So this is, if we go back up into the upstream block, so we can see that we have set our our unicorn to listen on this Unix socket on tmp unix shopper.sock. So that's basically where we're getting this path here, right? So once we set this path, we know that, okay, upstream, the server, the application server is listening on the Unix socket, which is located here in this file here in tmp/shopper.sock. Then we have the server name. You guys already know what the server name does. We're setting Nginx to listen on port 80, right? So if we were doing HTTPS, so if we were doing, for example, a SSL encrypted request, we would probably need to listen on port 443 as well, right? But yeah, we're just gonna do 80 right now because that should work just fine. I think I mistakenly typed sites. I think we set it to www opt and then www folder. So make sure that you have the right folder set up over here. Try files. Basically, we want to try this file before we try the other one, and then basically before we pass it on to the unicorn block, which is down here. And then basically we set the headers for the request before we passing it off onto our unicorn server. And then we set up the settings for the assets so that it works for, we can use like a CDN to serve our assets. If we don't set this header, basically it will say that our assets can only be served from our Rails site. So only from this Nginx server that we're setting up here that we can serve the assets, which is not necessarily a good thing, because if you want to utilize CDN, CDNs are cheap. I mean, just get a CDN and, make your site quicker, just, very quickly. So this is a good setting to have for the assets. And then we just set our pages and the max body size, and basically the timeout time. That's basically it. And that basically wraps up our Nginx configuration file. And so now let's try this out, right? This we've configured it, and I think everything looks good. So let's see if it works. So I'm just going to escape this and quit, right? So I'm going to save and quit by doing WQ. And basically now, if you remember, we have to delete the default, because if I cat out the default, for example, so let's do a sudo cat default. Basically this is right now set as the default, sudo vi. This is now set up as the default server. So we want to use our default one, which is the one we just set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and quit this one and just remove it. So actually we don't need to remove it, because we just need to disable it from sites enabled. So I'm going to go into sites enabled. So cd ... and then cd sites enabled, and we're just going to remove our symbolic link for all the other sites. So basically we just want checkin.me to be the only one that's active, right? So I'm going to do rm. Yeah. Okay, so remove that. Remove that as well. All right, so now we only have checkin.me, but we need to reload our configuration because this has changed since the last time we loaded it. So let's do a sudo nginx reload. Okay, maybe something went wrong. Probably some configuration file in our, so it should say okay, right? So we're gonna do cd var log and cd nginx. And here we can see our error log. So I'm going to do a tail -f error.log. Okay, so there is an error, line number 3 over here, the last line, we can see that. So I'm just going to open up a new tab and I'm going to SSH into our server again. All right, so let me just quickly get the IP address for our little server here. All right. One thing, as we're going back into our server, I have a gist over here that I created where you guys can just quickly come and read through it if you need to. You know, it's just a gist that I created, and you can access it from my gist page over here. It's called app name. It says Nginx config. So just come and read through it if you need to, or copy it and just paste it in your file if you don't want to type through, you know, the one. But it's all online, and you guys can access it however you like. All right, so I think we're back into our server. So I'm just going to go back into cd etc nginx and go into sites available. And we're going to go and fix our all right, so it says line 3. So let's check it out. Okay, basically I found it. I forgot to put a semicolon. You know, curse me for being a Ruby developer. But yeah, I forgot to put in a semicolon over there. That's why it failed. I'm gonna save that out. And we're gonna try another one. So sudo service nginx reload. All right, it says okay. Awesome. So it looks like everything loaded correctly. Does that mean that now we can actually access our site? Well, let's try it out. Okay, something went wrong. Yeah, so that's the 500 page that we dread, that we see so often. So let's figure out what's wrong here. I'm gonna go into our application, so cd/opt. So let's see if the log said anything, if there was any error. So basically now we have, since there's no error in Nginx, so we need to access the access.log from Nginx. So we need to do sudo tail-f access.log. So everything seems to be working just fine in terms of Nginx. You know, we're getting a 500 error. That's probably coming from our application. So I'm just going to go and see what's going on in our application server. So I'm going to go into checkin.me. And we're going to look at our log. So this is the application log, right? So we can look in unicorn.stderror.log. So tail-f. It's probably something to do with like migrations and databases and whatnot. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, that's not it. Okay, so tail-f unicorn.stdout.log. So nothing. So let's do our production.log. Okay, here we go. I'm just gonna redo our page so that it puts out the server. Yeah, so basically, as I suspected, it's something to do with our you know, products relation does not exist. Basically, we haven't set up our database. We haven't migrated our database. Essentially, that's what it's saying. That's what it's complaining about. So let's go out and go into our application. I'm gonna do a rake db create. I think our database has been created, so I'm just gonna, yeah, so there you go, already exists. So I'm gonna rake db migrate. So this will basically migrate our database and set up all the tables and all the relations and whatnot that need to go for our application to work. So now if we go back and do a reload real quick, it's still saying that it's failing. That's probably because we need to restart our application. So sudo restart. Not retard. Restart shopper. Okay, this is going to restart our application server. It's going to reconnect to the database and it should register the new database and everything should be fine. Okay, well, that didn't work. So let's figure out what's wrong. Gonna go into tail-f production.log. Okay, it's saying something else has failed. Okay, so just reload real quick. Application.cs is not precompiled. Okay, so that's means we just need to rake assets precompile. Fine. Okay, so the first time around, when you set up your application, you probably will need to, to do this sort of stuff. Okay, so it says that we could not find JavaScript runtime. That's probably because we haven't installed Node.js. I probably forgot. So to fix that is very easy. So we need to do a sudo add apt repository ppa Chris Leah node. I think it was node.js. Yep, that's right. Okay, so we need to install Node.js in order for assets precompilation to work on our server. So once we've added that, we're gonna do sudo apt-get apt-get update, right? We need to update the sources first, and then we're gonna install our Node.js so that there's JavaScript runtime that we can compile with. So sudo install node.js -y. There you go. It's going to install the latest version 10.22. That's why we added the PPA. Yep, it's going to install the Node.js, and basically once we have that, we're going to try and do rake assets precompile once more. So this time everything should work just fine. Fingers crossed, if the gods of the internet are helping us out. Okay, cannot allocate memory. All right. So this is a bit of a drag. Essentially, what's happening here is it's using too much memory, and the VM that we're using only has 512. So if you guys running on a 512 VM, I'm gonna create a new video. Basically, it'll show you how to. Actually, I'm not gonna create a new video. I'm gonna point you guys in the next direction, so where you guys can go from here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and do it off screen, and basically, come back and do the assets precompile, and it'll all just work magically. So essentially, what's happening here is basically it's trying to do the assets precompile, but because there's not enough memory, and by default, DigitalOcean does not allow swap running on their VMs. So that's why it's failing. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and tell you the page where you can figure this out. So DigitalOcean enable swap. So just go ahead and basically follow along with this tutorial on this page here from DigitalOcean. It'll tell you basically how to enable swap on your VM, and once you have your assets precompilation will work, and then you'll be able to start your application. So I'm just gonna pause the video, go ahead and do this, and then basically I'm gonna come back and compile the video. So I enable swap on our VM here. Let's try to do a rake assets precompile. So the first time around, things can always be a little bit hairy. It might be a little bit difficult to get things started, but if you know what's going on and what the problem is, it can be very easy for you guys to figure it out and solve the problem and move on, right? Okay, it's still saying command failed. Usually it should pass. So I'm just gonna go quick reboot. And I'm gonna try to log back on. Log back in. I'm gonna do htop to see how much memory we've got here. Okay, seems to be okay. Let's see if our unicorn application is running. Yes, it is. All right, that looks good. So I'm just gonna cd back into our opt/www cd check-in.me, and I'm going to do a rake assets pre-compile once more. All right, so it's actually compiling our assets now. I hope it passes. It should pass. Should be able to access the swap file now. Everything should be fine. I think it was just not enough memory before because, you know, that server was started for a while and it has never been restarted, and there's a very limited amount of memory, and Rails does use a lot of memory, and we are starting 2 unicorn workers. But yeah, I mean, now it's basically compiling the assets and everything should work just fine. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And once this is done, we're going to restart our unicorn server once again. So I'm just going to pause the video and come back once this assets has been compiled. All right, so it looks like our application assets has been compiled successfully. I didn't get any error this time. So let's just go and restart our unicorn server. So sudo shopper, restart shopper. Okay, so basically this should work. We've set up our database. We've compiled our assets. So if I do a reload real quick here, yay, it works. So here we go. It's loading up with assets and everything. Obviously, it's an empty store, and you guys can obviously go in and, you know, you can go in and admin and log in and, you know, go ahead and create your own products and whatever to try it out. I'm not going to set anything up further than this. I think the rest of the way you guys can take it. So yeah, back to this link. If you need to set up the swap, you know, just to increase the memory available to your application, you know, just for it's not going to use swap when Unicorn is running in memory anyway. It's just using it for compiling the assets, you know, which you can use swap in that case. But yeah, just, you know, if you have limited memory, you might want to enable swap and everything will work just fine. As we have here, our application is booted up and running and everything is working. So what's next? So our application is working, but the process is not done. I mean, if we had to, every time we deployed a new version and we had to come in and do this manual labor of migrating and compiling assets every time, that would be very mundane. So what we want to do is we want to set up some sort of a way to make it very easy for us to, once we push the code up, you know, sort of like Heroku, where they run the migration and compile your assets for you automatically. So in the next set of videos, we're going to be taking a look at automating some of that stuff. And we're going to be taking a look at basically how we can, you know, improve this process further, right? So we can, you know, right now we can push code up and we'll set it up in a way that, you know, the assets and database, everything all set up automatically as we push. And, you know, basically we need to improve the security of the server. So we're going to talk about security in the next videos as well. So yeah, basically once it's all done, I think you guys are going to have a pretty good idea of how DevOps life, you know, works. Essentially all the kind of things you want to worry about, the process. And, you know, you guys could use Chef or Puppet or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're not going to take you away from having to learn all this stuff. You know, if you learn the basics and you know how all this stuff works, you'll understand those tools better anyway. Yeah, again, that's pretty much it for this video. It might have been a little bit long, but I hope you guys found it useful. And leave us comments, talk to us. If you like the video, like the video. If you dislike the video for whatever reason, tell us why you don't like the video and then dislike the video. I appreciate your feedback, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, guys.